I'm Flynn from Distinct Magazine. This is my brother Blake. Is helping me out today. Today we're going to talk with Dr. Brock Idy, who is one of the co-authors of Dyslect Advantage and is the CEO of neurolearning.com. He is an amazing advocate for dyslexics. Welcome, Dr. Brock.
Thanks very much for having me. I appreciate the invitation to be with you today.
Thank you for joining us today. We have some questions for you. What do you do for a living?
So currently, I'm mostly focused on the company that you mentioned, NeuroLearning, which creates dyslexia screening tests now. We're hoping to move that into a regular diagnostic test soon, and also provides people some tests that they can use to discover their dyslexia-related strengths. One of the big problems for people with dyslexia is that most of them don't really know that they are dyslexic. And so having cheap and available tests that can help them find out is really important. And then most people that know that they're dyslexic don't understand that there are strengths that are connected with being dyslexic too. So we really want to help people that find out about their dyslexia understand the good parts about it, which we think are really what the important things are.
Okay. Why did you write the book, The Distinct Advantage?
So my wife and I were working in a clinic that we started to examine and help people that had learning issues of all different kinds. So if they were having difficulty in school, or if they were having problems at work that dealt with their reading or their writing or their ability to communicate or things like that, they would come to our clinic and ask us if we could figure out why and help them. And so we started initially seeing people with all sorts of learning differences. So we saw people with dyslexia, we saw people with other language issues, we saw people with autism spectrum things, people with attention issues, just anything that impacted learning. And we became especially interested over the first 10 years or so that we were doing that, with the fact that when we saw people with dyslexia, we weren't just seeing the same problems again and again. So we were seeing, people who'd said, I have trouble sounding out words. I have trouble figuring out what all those words are. I'm not a very good speller. I read really slowly. So common problems, but we also noticed that dyslexic people and their families had an unusually high number of things in common that we would call strengths. So certain kinds of creativity, certain kinds of spatial ability. We saw lots of families that were in engineering or architecture or certain kind of mechanics or building trades that involve spatial talents. We saw people that were involved in things that required them to be able to think ahead and make predictions about what was going to happen soon, because things were really changing fast, or required them to make predictions to keep ahead of potential problems that could occur. And we saw people that were really good at telling stories. So people that might be involved in, for example, sales or in counseling or other kinds of things where you had to tell stories to people that would help them make sense out of the world. And so when we saw these patterns of talents, we went back to the all of the literature that was available from scientists where they had studied people with dyslexia, and we tried to figure out if there was some basis for the strengths that we were seeing, or if other people had noticed similar kinds of things. And we found that there were very good reasons to think that the kinds of differences that scientists found in the brains of people with dyslexia would create these kind of strengths, as well as the kind of reading challenges with decoding or problems with spelling or problems with reading speed that people with dyslexia had. And so we felt that dyslexia was like a coin that had two sides. On one side, you had these challenges, problems with the reading and spelling and that sort of thing, and then the other side was these strengths, and they were all coming from the same places in the brain, the same way of organizing the brain. And we thought that that was a really important story because it seemed pretty obvious to us that if you have 10 or 15 or 20% of all the people in the world that have a brain that's like this, that there are probably so many of them because it does something good, not because it's this kind of broken brain. And so we thought that if this bigger picture was emerging, that dyslexia was really a good thing, but that people had just sort of gotten a hold of the wrong end of it and focused on the things that people with dyslexia struggled with instead of paying attention and noticing the fact that these people were better at other important things than people without dyslexia. And so we really wanted to try to improve the understanding of dyslexia in the way that people thought about it, the way that teachers thought about their students with dyslexia, and the way that people with dyslexia thought about themselves or about their children with dyslexia. So that's the reason we wrote the book.
Okay, so what are some advantages in having dyslexia?
So when we wrote our book, we talked about 4 things that we called the mind strengths, and those were patterns of abilities. And we call it mind to make it sort of easy to remember. The M stood for what we called material reasoning, which was really reasoning about the spatial characteristics of things, or 3-dimensional spatial reasoning, how things exist in space, what their shapes are, what they look like if you rotate them, move them around, how they move through space, trajectories, and things like that. And the ability to reason spatially in 3 dimensions is something that characterizes a lot of people with dyslexia. The I stood for interconnected reasoning, and that involved the ability to think about systems and relationships and how things could be connected together. So certain kinds of creativity are dependent upon the fact that you can see distant relationships between things that connect them together that other people can't see so well. And dyslexic people have been found to be more creative in that way than non-dyslexic people. There are many, many tests now that have shown that people with dyslexia are better at making distant connections between things than other people. N stands for narrative reasoning, and narrative is kind of another word for story. And it really relates to the ability to think about things in terms of examples or cases or stories rather than as definitions or abstract things that are separate from specific things that happen or you experience in life. And it really denotes the fact that people with dyslexia learn through experience better than they learn through thinking about things in an abstract manner and learn through words and talking and things like that. And then finally, D strength was for dynamic reasoning, and that was that predictive ability. So if you see a process taking place, that process can be the erosion of soil from a mountain, over years and years in the rain, or the formation of a canyon, or it can be the way a machine works, or it can be a political process when you see changes in society, thinking ahead and thinking what things are going to be like in a year or two, or in the way that you run your shop. What are people buying now? What do I need to order more? Where do I need to be 3 months from now? That ability to think ahead and see how processes work out over time and then plan for that's the D strength. So those were special abilities that we saw in people with dyslexia. Other people have noticed some other things. One is empathy. So there are some researchers in San Francisco that have done 2 studies where they looked at people with dyslexia, kids especially, and they found that, for example, if you show groups of children movies that have strong emotional content in them. So they showed people movies with spiders in them, and they showed people movies with sad things in them. The people with dyslexia react more to the emotional content in the movies than other people. They're more sensitive to things that go around. So they pick up on things that go around with other people. And those are important strengths. Other people have documented strengths in something that's called incidental learning. Incidental learning means, are you good at learning stuff that nobody told you you should try to learn? So if you just go somewhere and do something, do you learn more, pick up more random stuff going on around about you than other people? Or, it's like the flip side of being tightly focused. If you're really tightly focused on something, and the teacher tells you, okay, I want you to pay attention to this, you can put all of your attention there and nothing will disturb you. Well, there's some good things about being able to do that, but there's some bad things about being able to do that also. You don't learn all the other stuff going on around you that nobody told you might be important later. And so people that have very tight focused attention have weak learning from their environment, weak incidental learning. People with dyslexia, people with ADHD tend to be tuned a little bit more so that their attention's a little bit leakier and they pick up more stuff around them that they don't know at the time is going to be important to know. But then later on they have that and they can use that for other things. So there's some because of that, they're much better at learning from experience than other people are. And that's why so many inventors and so many creative people are dyslexic. It's because they pick up on all this stuff that nobody knows is important yet. It only becomes important later on when people suddenly start making connections between things. So those are dyslexic strengths.
Well, good. Are you or anyone in your family dyslexic?
So my dad is super duper dyslexic. So he when he was in college, I saw his report cards and he was good at math, but he was really bad at reading and writing. And he had straight A's in all of his classes that had to do with math and accounting, which is what he was. He became an accountant. And he had straight D's, which is just right next to failing in everything else. So in English class and history class and all that kind of stuff, he just couldn't read. So my dad was really classically dyslexic. I'm not super dyslexic. I have like dyslexic eye problems, so it's really hard for me to read fast. I can't read any faster than I talk. And in college, that got to be a problem. So I'd always go and check out the books that we would have to read for classes. And if there was more than just a little stack of books, I would not take that class because I couldn't read that fast. But other than reading speed, I didn't really have too many problems. I was not a good speller, but I was not super bad. But I could read at the same rate that I talked, and so I didn't have too much problems in school until they really started giving us a lot of reading. Our daughter was more like my dad. She had more significant dyslexic problems, but she could actually read pretty fast. But the way that she read was she would get more of a general impression of what was going on and then make pictures in her mind about it. And the pictures were often better than the books that she was reading. They were often things that she was making up. So it took her a while to learn how to read what was really on the page and not just to sort of get the general impressions out of it. But that was she was more typically dyslexic, we would say, but she had all of those strengths of a dyslexic person. She had a tremendous imagination. When she was 15, she was getting paid money from companies in Asia to write scripts for video games for them, and she had a few 100,000 people following her stories that she would write on the internet. So she was super duper creative, but she was a very interesting speller, and he had some other dyslexia related kinds of challenges also. But in my family, the people that were dyslexic were super duper creative, and they were super successful at what they did. But they focused on the things that they were good at, and they got help with the things that they weren't so good at, and that was the key to their being successful.
Okay. And why did you choose to develop an online dyslexic scanner?
So the reason that we did that was that there are just so many people. There were two reasons. There were so many people that didn't know that they were dyslexic, and then so many people that thought of dyslexia in the wrong way. So when our book came out at first in 2011, our book about dyslexia, we got contacted by some people that wanted to help us set up a nonprofit organization, which in the United States means organization people can give money to you so that you can spend it for a good purpose, and then they don't have to pay taxes on it. Um, but we did some things with that. We set up some conferences that we had people come to, and we put out some magazines and did other things. But we thought, what's the most important thing for people with dyslexia that's not being addressed? And we said, well, it's really the fact that so many people with dyslexia don't know that they're dyslexic. So what can we do about that? Well, we thought we could make a test to help them find out. And so that was how we got started. It was in our nonprofit organization, but then eventually we moved it out to make it a separate thing, and that was how the screening company came about. But our goals from the start were, number one, to help more people find out early about their dyslexia so that they could learn to understand it and do well with it. And secondly, to help make the dominant vision of what it means to be dyslexia that most people have one that's centered around those strengths that we talked about instead of around the weaknesses. Because too many people, when they think about dyslexia, think about just problems with spelling or problems with reading, but we really think that that's the minor thing with dyslexia. It's the inconvenient thing, but the important thing is the things that you can do, the things that it makes you better at. And if people really understood the different way that people with dyslexia and people with ADHD think about things, and how to teach those kinds of thinkers better, and how to help them learn better, and how to help them at work so that they can be more successful, then people would start to recognize that dyslexia is really a tremendous asset or a tremendous gift to our society, because it creates the creative people that keep us from just doing things the same way over and over and over and over again, the same way every single time. And it's all that innovation and that push to do things in a new way, and to do things in a way nobody's done before, that people with dyslexia and ADHD give the rest of us.
Okay. Who helps you with what you do?
So I've had a lot of help. So in our screener test business, the person that helped us the most was actually a man with both dyslexia and ADHD himself, who is a tremendous technology person and creator. As a matter of fact, he created about half of the algorithms that allow us to talk together over Zoom. So he was one of the real pioneers of streaming video over the internet. And back in the early 2000s, so 15, 20 years ago, 80% of all the information that streamed over the internet came over his programs, and still a lot of stuff goes over it. So he was a big helper. He provided the technology know-how to do the testing business, and then we provided the knowledge about dyslexia and about learning. And so together we did those kinds of things to help with our work uh, on the Dyslexic Advantage nonprofit organization. We've had some big foundations, so groups of people that donated money or left money to their, to a foundation that gave money then to our nonprofit to help other people, and then a lot of individual people around the world have sent in money so that we can create information that helps people learn more about dyslexia. Um, when we wrote our book, we had publishers that bought and and published the book and sold the book all around the world so that people could buy it and learn about it. And without the people that were involved in that process, that wouldn't have happened. And right now we're making a movie about the Dyslexic Advantage. And a very good man in Florida gave us some money to do that. A very talented filmmaker from New Zealand is the director and helping us do that. Some very amazing people with dyslexia who volunteered to let us film them and talk to them and be a part of that. And those people have all been really super important. And then in our books, all the people that talked to us and told us about their stories, and all the people that came through our clinic and let us talk to them and examine them and learn from them. All those people were just amazingly important to us. So we've had a lot of help.
We have people listening from all across the world. Where is home for you?
In just out of Seattle, Washington. So we're on the west coast of the United States, very far up on the north, almost to Canada. And so we're very close to the Pacific Ocean, that we could sail straight to Australia if we were just a little bit further out to the west. So we're right off the water that goes into what's called Puget Sound in Washington, which is salt water, but it's like a big bay. And if we were a little bit further out, we'd be right in the Pacific Ocean. So we could just zoom down and see you guys.
Good. What part of the country do you like the most?
I like our part of the country the most in the summer for sure, because it's really beautiful here when the weather is warm and the sky's clear. But to be honest, it rains a lot here during the winter, and that gets a little bit old at times. During the winter time, it's very nice to be in California where it's sunny and warm, or in the southern parts of the United States. I think we would like to visit them a little bit more during the winter time. But there's a lot of nice places in the United States because it's a big enough country that it's different in different places at different times of the year.
We are a family that loves dogs. Do you have pets?
We do have a dog. We have a dog who's almost 16 years old. So she was a half Pomeranian, half Chihuahua mix. So she's only about this big. And she's very sweet. She thinks she's still a puppy, so she's very playful, but she's getting to an age where she's starting to get a little bit sick. So it's a little sad, but she's been with us for almost 16 years. She was so small when we got her that the dog breeder that sold her to us had her in his little shirt pocket when he came to visit us, and just pulled her out. She was only this big. So
Wow, that's funny.
yeah, she was tiny, 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 but she has a big heart.
Oh, that's a
We have lots of little animals that come visit us too that we don't own, but we have lots of squirrels that come and we feed them. We have some crows that become friends of ours now and then, and until they pass away, they'll come and sit with us and eat with us. And we have some other kinds of birds that'll come by, jays and things like that. We have a lot of animals that live around us that are not especially friendly, but we have coyotes. You guys know what coyotes are? I don't know if you guys have other kinds of wild dogs in Australia, dingoes or something. Is that what you guys have?
they're no Tasmanian.
In Tasmania. So yeah, we have, they're like, coyotes are like little wolves. They don't really attack people very much, but they'll attack little dogs, small animals, and things like that. And they howl at night like wolves do when they see the moon, and they're kind of noisy. We have a lot of deer and a lot of raccoons. I don't know, you guys might not have raccoons either, but they're little animals with like masks on them, like robbers. They're very cute, very smart. So we get visited by lots of little creatures.
And what's a fun fact about you?
Fun fact about me. I'm I think for me, my Norwegian heritage is something that's very important and I like a lot. And I started to learn to speak Norwegian when I was 55 years old, which is something that is a little bit difficult because when you get older, your brain gets more and more stupid and you don't learn you don't learn as well anymore. So if you want to learn another language, try it early, guys. I recommend it heartily. But I've managed to learn so I can speak what I call fluent nonsense in Norwegian now, and I really like learning about my family's historical culture in Norway. So
Thank you, Dr. Brock, for your time. We think what you are doing is incredible.
thanks very much. I really appreciate that, Plan and Blake. You guys have been great hosts here. So been a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. That's to say,